by eating plant-based just one day a week, you can have a greater impact on climate change than by eating 100% of your food from local sources 7 days a week, which would be really impossible to do anyway, unless that includes spices and herbs and everything you eat. You could eat local 7 days a week, and you're still not going to do as much good for the planet as if you ate a plant-based diet one day a week.
Yeah.
So, if you wanted to do, if you want to go above and beyond, some people are doing a plant-based diet and trying to get a lot of their ingredients locally. That's certainly a good thing. But definitely the more important factor is eating plant-based over eating local.
I mean, you have to just try to do better and better and better. I feel like I call local eating animals locally is like half-assing it. When I was training, some days I half-assed it, not very often, but some days I just, I didn't bring my best. I didn't bring everything I had. So if we really care, we're really going to make a difference. No more half-assing.
Yeah, and who would really laugh at the idea of local food equating to necessarily something better is all of the countless people across the country in rural areas who are living in the shadow of factory farms. I visited a woman on the eastern shore of Maryland in the course of writing my book named Lisa. She lives on land that's been part of her family for like 4 generations, really bucolic kind of setting. But they've been invaded by these chicken factory farms. And now just throughout her totally otherwise normal suburban neighborhood, they've got these mega farms, right, literally in her backyard. The flies are so thick they can't even go outside. The stench is terrible. When I was there, I saw just buzzards, dozens of buzzards flying overhead ready to pick off these dead birds. Well, for Lisa and her neighbors, those factory farms are local. They couldn't get more local than that. They're literally in their backyard. They're like a stone's throw away from the house. But they're not good. They're still factory farms. You can't get much more local, and they're still terrible, terrible places. So, anybody I think who is focusing on eating local, generally I would say that's a good thing. But if you're eating meat and dairy and eggs, it's still probably contributing to the problem of factory farming.
And most of the, in the United States, you talk about how chickens are most of the meat that is eaten in the United States. And Americans seem to think chicken is the better choice, both health-wise and environmentally. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. 9 out of every 10 animals we eat in the U.S. is a chicken. There are about 10 billion farm animals in the country, and of those 10 billion, about 9 billion are chickens. We are just knee-deep in chickens. The amount of waste that they produce is staggering. The amount of land that requires is staggering. The amount of resources that go to feeding all those chickens is staggering. The whole thing is completely unsustainable. And from a health perspective, chicken has always been marketed as a kind of lean meat, but that's changed a lot in recent years. Chicken factory farmers and the chicken industry have been pushing what we would call kind of the bird's genetic limit to the max. So chickens now are bred to grow really large, really fast. And they grow at such a huge rate that if a human baby grew the same way, she would weigh over 600 pounds when she was just 2 months old. So imagine a 2-month-old baby weighing 600 pounds. That's what chickens are in this country now. And what that has resulted in, among all the animal welfare problems you can imagine that come with that, is are problems in the animal's fat and musculature. And those problems have resulted in chickens on the whole now having about 9% less protein and 200% more fat than they did even 5 years ago. So even just in the last 5 years, chicken, which was once a lean meat, has a lot less protein and a lot more fat in it.
They're 5 times at slaughter weight the size that they were in 1957.
Exactly. That's right. They're 5 times what they were in 1957. These are not your grandmother's chickens anymore. These are Frankenbirds that have been just bred to grow monstrously huge. And the result is their legs break out from underneath them because they're so top heavy. They have heart attacks. Their lungs fail. And there's no other example in the animal kingdom where a baby animal has a heart attack. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And
so
that's common in chicken production.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you when you said baby. It's the other thing that I think that no one recognizes or has any idea that's going on is every single farm animal, large scale production farm animal anyway, that we're eating is a baby. A lot of people don't want to touch veal because it's a baby, but they slaughter these chickens at only months of age. They slaughter pigs at 6 months of age. They're babies. I've seen them come into Farmer John's downtown, babies. They're tiny. And same with cattle. They're usually under a year. So we're all eating babies.
Yeah, and I grew up eating everything under the sun. I grew up in a rural area in New Hampshire, and our neighbors had horses. There were farms nearby. We ate everything. We ate a lot of seafood, beef, chicken, you name it. But the one thing that my family wouldn't touch was veal. And I remember asking my mother at an early age, like, "Oh, why don't we eat veal?" And she said, "Oh, it's really cruel what they do to the animals, and they're just baby animals." And so that has kind of etched itself into people's consciousness. Even people who aren't vegetarian or aren't vegan by any means kind of know now veal's off limits. Well, you're right. The same principle applies to chickens. Every single chicken slaughtered in this country is a baby animal. They're not even 2 months old at the time they are killed for the market.
My mom too we didn't eat veal and we didn't eat foie gras. Not that foie gras was around a lot, but I know that my mother just said no. She taught us about foie gras really early. Michael, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when I was on my farm, chickens were cheap, and you got a lot of them all at once. To get a steer, we only had one steer, and we raised it for a season, and we slaughtered it. We didn't have many steers. But when you buy chickens, it's amazing. They come, I remember it like it was yesterday. They come in a box, and there's 1,000 of these little baby chickens inside this box, and you have to put lights on them to raise them, to weed out where the roosters are, because you don't know, because it's just this sort of box of chickens. And I can just sense as a child just the inexpensiveness as far as building this farm to have chickens, and they duplicate. If you let the eggs sit under the hens, they're going to continue to make more babies. They just kind of they're almost like gremlins. You dump a little bit of water on them and they seem to multiply. And I think that's the saddest part about it is I think that they're just a inexpensive resource, from a protein standpoint, that farms typically abuse. And if we could put a cap on what you can actually have, like if we could just say you can't have millions of chickens, you know what I mean, as a farm, that'd be better off.
I visited a chicken farmer in Arkansas recently, big industrial factory farmer, chicken farm type of guy. He's a good guy. He just, has kind of entered that line of work, because it's one of the few options in rural Arkansas if you want to make some money. And I was talking to him about kind of better ways they could treat the animals, different types of production systems they could use to treat the animals better. And I said, look, the way you're doing it now, you've got, thousands and thousands and thousands of your chickens die. They don't even make it to market. That can't be efficient for you as a farmer. You're wasting all that money. And he said, you know what, chickens are cheap. And it doesn't really matter if that many of them die because the conditions are so terrible because they're so cheap to buy, which is really sad. And you think about, all of the problems of industrial factory farming in terms of animal cruelty. And then you've got, thousands and millions of animals who die before they even ever end up at the slaughterhouse, just totally in vain. It's a really terrible system. But the reason why that system exists is because people continue eating the product, and a lot of it. The reason why that farmer down in Arkansas, who I hung out with, needs to pump out that many chickens is because people are demanding it. And that is slowly changing, fortunately, as plant-based eating becomes more and more and more popular. And I think one of the great effects that we're going to see from a switch to a plant-based diet is that there's going to be less strain on the farming system to pump out so many animals, and farmers will eventually be able to use these better methods of animal production.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long. Does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review, and zoom, zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.